Welcome to Mindfuel with me, your host, Tamara. Life gets busy, and oftentimes we find ourselves running on empty and putting our own needs last. Each episode of this podcast will provide you with actionable advice, compassion, and a little tough love to give your mind the fuel it needs to live a full, healthy, and balanced lifestyle. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend some time with me today. So sit down, relax, and prepare to refuel. Hello. Welcome to an episode of Mindfuel with me, Tamara. Today we are going to be talking about a super popular topic, and that is interview tips. Now, these interview tips are not just any interview tips. They are interview tips that I got from administrators themselves. So I actually spoke to some administrators in my community, and I asked them, what are your top best interview tips for someone who is just getting started or someone who is looking for a new position in the education world? And I compiled a list of the top interview tips that they gave me. These interview tips could also be used for someone who is applying to any job, really, and they could even be used for someone who is doing an interview for a graduate program. I actually recently had a graduate program interview, and looking at this list that I've compiled, I can see that all of these would have applied to help me become more prepared for that interview. So these are just the top interview tips that I think would apply all across the board, and I am just going to dive right in. Tip number one is more about the actual application process. So when you are looking for jobs to apply to, don't just apply for every single job that you see out there. Apply for only the jobs that you feel you have a passion for, that you feel like would be a good fit for you and for the background knowledge that you have. So make sure that you're doing your homework about that position, do your homework about the school, the priorities of that school, check their website. What does the school stand for? What are their mission and goals of that school? Do they have a literacy priority? Do they have a numeracy priority? Is it a bilingual school? Is it immersion? What is this school about? And is it a school that you see yourself working at? Do you feel passionate about the community, the school itself, and the actual position that you're applying for? For example, if the position is to teach, Spanish 20, probably not a good idea to apply for that job if you don't speak any Spanish, right? So it's super important just to do your homework about each of the positions before you're applying. So tip number one, don't apply if it's not a good fit for you. All right, tip number two is about the cover letter. So when you are creating a cover letter for a position that you're applying for, don't make the mistake of making a generic cover letter. Now remember, these tips are coming straight from administrators, the people who are very likely reading your cover letters and your resumes, and they don't want to see a generic cover letter. They want to see a cover letter that is obviously highlighting the job that you're applying for. It's highlighting the skills that you have that they're asking for, the requirements that you have that they're asking for in that specific position. And so make sure that you're personalizing every cover letter that you write for every position that you apply for. Use the same words that they use in the job posting in your cover letter if they truly do match who you are. Tip number three. This is more about the actual interview. So you are definitely going to want to prepare what you think some questions might be in the interview. So go to the website of the school, look at their priorities, look at what they're about, assume some of the questions that they might ask you, do some research online about typical interview questions for the position that you're applying for and write them out. For me, I like to make a Word document. I type out a bunch of questions that I think might be asked, and then I type out my answers that I would give to that question, and then I basically study it like it's an exam. I will sit there and I will read over the questions and the answers that I typed out over and over again until I feel prepared for any of those questions. And when I start, I find myself typing, answers that might help me with other questions. Because of course, you're not going to get every question that they ask. You're not going to know or be able to prepare for every question that might come at you in that interview. But what you can do is brainstorm all of these different ideas, and likely they will ask a question that you will have prepared an answer for, even if it's not the exact same question that you assumed they would ask. For example, if they ask a question about what is balanced literacy, and in your preparations you wrote out everything you know about literacy, then you will most likely be prepared to answer a question about balanced literacy. And so that is one of the best tips I think on here, is just to prepare what you think some questions might be based on the school and based on the position you're applying for, and practicing those questions over and over again. Number 4 tip. Number 4 is actually about your references. So this was something that a lot of these administrators did mention, and they said that when you put your references down on your resume, you should make sure that those references are aware that they're on there. You should talk to those references beforehand. You should ask them if they would be okay with being a reference for you, and make sure that you are being strategic about who you're picking for your reference. You want to make sure that this person is going to say wonderful things about you. Don't pick someone that you maybe had a not so good relationship with, or maybe you left the job on, not the best terms. Make sure you're picking someone who is going to give you a positive reference. References should be honest with you when you ask them. If you are asking them for a reference and they're not really ready to give you a positive one, then they should be honest with you about whether or not, they think they would be a good reference for you. Another tip about references that I got was, make sure you pick a variety of different people and a well-rounded list of references. For example, you might want to put someone who supervised you in post-secondary, maybe a professor that you worked closely with, and then maybe you want to put somebody who has been a supervisor in an actual work capacity in there. Maybe you want to have somebody who was a leader at a school you worked for. Maybe you want to put down your practicum supervisor. So have a good range. And also try to make sure that you can put the previous employer, your last employer, on there as a reference, because it could raise a red flag if the job you're applying for looks at this and sees that your last position, that you didn't mention their reference on your reference list, because it's likely they're going to know that there was something negative there, and that's the reason why you're not putting them down as a reference. So just to be aware of that, make sure you are maintaining those good relationships with people. Make sure that you're maintaining strong relationships with your previous supervisors, your previous professors, your previous practicum supervisors. Send them an email regularly. Let them know you're applying for positions and that you would love to have them as a reference for you. And, more times than not, they are more than willing to give you those references. All right, tip number 5, be open-minded, but also, you need to know what is it that you can provide for the schools. So you want to make sure that you are, being open-minded when they're asking you in the interview about, how can you contribute to our school? You need to be open-minded about what they might suggest that you can contribute to that school. They might say, hey, we need someone to, supervise or teach our drama club at lunch. Is that something that you're able to do? Be open-minded about it. Be someone who is willing to try new things, because that's what they want to see. They want to see flexibility. They want to see someone who's willing, someone who's open, and someone who truly wants to contribute to that school. But also, know what else you can provide for the school before you go into the interview. Ask, how can I be involved in something? How can I be involved in extracurriculars? I'm here, I'm open, I'm willing to help. I want to contribute to the school. What can I do? And you can also have something in mind before you go to the interview where you can suggest, hey, I'm really great at coaching volleyball. I would love to coach a volleyball club here. They will love to hear that you are wanting to contribute to the school other than in your hours that you need to be teaching. Tip number 6, dress professionally. Now, this should be something that doesn't even need to be mentioned, but it's so important that you dress in a way that makes you look like you are ready to be treated like the professional that you are. Pick something that is something you are comfortable in, something that isn't showing a ton of skin. Make sure that it's appropriate, and make sure that you are well groomed that day. Take a shower, do your hair, shave, do whatever you need to do. Just make sure you look well groomed. Don't have that scruffy beard going into this interview. You want to make sure that you are looking your best and looking professional. To add on to that, another tip I received from these administrators was to make sure that you go in there looking confident, but also not too overly confident. You definitely don't want to look cocky. And so your mindset when you go into that interview should be, I'm the best person you're going to interview for this job today, and I know exactly why. And then you're going to obviously show them why through your interview. But that's the mindset. You need to go in there super confident, hold your head up high, put those shoulders back, give them a firm handshake, and you show them that you are a wonderful candidate for that position. All right, tip number 7. Be you. Be authentic. Don't go in there trying to be who you think they want you to be or who you think they're looking for that position. You want to make sure that you are yourself. Show them your true personality. Obviously, you want to keep it professional, but there's no harm in showing your true self in an interview. This will actually help differentiate you from the other candidates. A lot of times, those candidates will go in there, they will be, straight-faced and stern and just give the answer to the question and have that monotone kind of voice because they're extremely nervous. And you want to make sure that you let your personality shine through, and this will help them remember you when they're looking through and shortlisting. All right, tip number 8. This one is super important, and I think a lot of us forget this or we worry about it a lot when we go into interviews. Be honest. If you don't know something or if you don't have a background in something, tell them. If you don't know the answer to something, don't try to manufacture some made-up answer because they're going to be able to tell. So it's better off that you just tell them you're not sure, tell them it's something that you'd love to learn more about, maybe tell them something that you know that's related to that, or just show them again that you're open-minded and that you're willing to help in any possible way. Tip number 9. Think of a way that you can make your name stand out from the rest of the crowd. So what can you do to make sure that when that employer is going back and looking through their interviews and making their shortlist, what can you do to make sure that they will see your name and remember your face and remember your excellent interview? So you're going to have to think about this before you go into your interview. I'm going to give you some suggestions for how you can make your name stand out. One of the ways that you can make your name stand out is to make sure that you promote the skills you have that are unique. So you want to make sure that you are going above and beyond just the basic skills that everyone else is going to have. Everyone in that interview is going to have the basic skills of a teacher. Everyone is going to come in there with their education degree, with their practicum placements, and possibly some other teaching positions that they've had in the past. So what can you bring that is above that basic skill set? So here are some ways that you can do that. Think about a position that you've had in the past that contributes to the teaching position that you're applying for. Think about transferable skills that you have gained from other jobs. And it doesn't have to be a teaching job. If you're just new to the teaching world, if you've just graduated with your education degree, this is your first job interview for a teaching position, that is okay. It doesn't mean that you do not have skills from other jobs or other volunteer experience that you've done in your life that could be transferred into a teaching position. And don't discount those skills. They are wonderful and they are valuable to this employer. So make sure you mention them. I mentioned before, one of the tips to be confident when you go in there. And remember that you are going in there trying to show these employers that you are the best candidate that they will interview today, and you're trying to show them why and convince them. So make sure that you mention all of these wonderful skills that you have from other positions as well. Maybe you had a unique practicum placement, and maybe you were teaching in a specific demographic, in a specific community where you learned all about a specific culture. Mention that. Mention how much you've learned in those practicum placements and some skills that you could contribute to this position as well. Also, think about the skills that you have that are just unique to you. Maybe you have an interest in photography. Maybe you're taking wonderful pictures and editing them in your free time. Maybe you have some wonderful skills in fitness. Maybe you've personally trained people before. Maybe you have some excellent computer experience or some design experience. Maybe you're an excellent graphic designer. What is it that is unique to you that you could bring to this school? Because these employers might not have put this in their ad for this position, but they might actually feel like, hey, we could use somebody who's good in photography. We could use somebody who has some really cool drama skills that could contribute to this school, that could run an extracurricular club or a lunch club with our students. We know that we would have a lot of interest in a photography club at our school. So they might not have mentioned this in their job posting, but they might think about it once you mention that you have those skills. All right, lastly, another way that you can make your name stand out is to ask questions at the end and make sure they're meaningful questions. You don't need to have 5 or 6 questions. You want to also respect the interviewer's time, but you can ask 1 or 2 meaningful questions at the end. A lot of people think that when employers ask at the end of the interview, do you have any questions? The polite thing to do would be to say no, because you feel like you might be an inconvenience to these interviewers. But the truth is, they want you to have questions. Why do they want you to have questions? Because having questions shows that you have a genuine interest in this position. And it also shows that you're thinking about how you could fit into this job. You're being realistic. You're thinking about if this would fit into your lifestyle. You're picturing yourself working at this position. And so this allows the interviewers to see that you're serious about this job and you're excited and you're interested in having this position. So here's some examples of some questions that you might ask at the end of an interview. An easy question that you can always start with is, when do you expect to have a decision made about this position? And a lot of times they will say they're not sure, but at least they're seeing that, hey, you're excited to hear about when they might have a decision about this position. You're excited to know the answer that they're going to come up with. Another question you could ask, and this is a really good one that sometimes makes the interviewers really, really think, but it also gives you some great insight for maybe another interview that you might be having. This question, you could use it for any job interview and just replace the word teacher with whatever job you're applying for. So here's the question. What do you feel separates a good teacher from an excellent teacher? And so if you were applying for any other job, you would just replace that word teacher with the other position that you're applying for. But this question is so great because these interviewers who may be administrators are going to tell you what they feel is above and beyond just a good teacher. They're going to be telling you what their expectations are going to be for someone who is a teacher at this school, because I'm sure that they're not just looking for a good teacher. Of course, they're going to want excellent teachers at their school. And so you'll really be able to get some insight into what they feel is very, very valuable and what they feel that their teachers should be striving for. And so that will be a very helpful question to you, and it will show that you have a lot of interest in becoming that excellent teacher that they are explaining to you. All right, tip number 10, take the time to prepare. Don't just wing it. Winging an interview is probably the worst possible thing that you could do. There are so many ways that you need to prepare for an interview to make sure that you're showing up as your best. First thing you can do to be very prepared is to ask yourself, where is this interview? Is the interview in person? Is the interview virtual? If the interview is in person, you need to think about how you're going to get to your interview. What time is the interview? And how can I get there to make sure that I arrive 15 minutes early? What time are you going to have to get up that day? Are you going to have to take some time out of school or work at your current job to make sure that you can get to this interview early, 15 minutes early? So how are you going to get there? Are you going to be driving there, walking there, taking the bus there? If you're taking the bus, check the bus schedule to make sure that there's a bus that's going to get you there early. You never want to walk in on time for an interview. On time is late, especially for an interview. You want to be there at least 15 minutes early and make sure that you have a minute to regroup before you walk in there and to feel really prepared and ready. You don't want to arrive late and be flustered, have, not sure where your stuff is. You know how it feels to be late for something. You can't find things and you get super flustered. You definitely don't want that when you're walking into an interview. So one thing that I like to suggest is to practice the drive beforehand. This is something I always do before an interview. I will practice the drive there anytime before the interview day. So it might just be the night before the interview, a week before the interview, anytime before. Just make sure that you practice the drive there, practice the bus route there, practice the walk there, whatever form of transportation you're taking. Make sure you give it a trial run so that you know where the parking is, you know what door you're going to be into, and you know what route you're going to be taking to that interview location. Now, if the interview is virtual, find out what's the platform that they're going to be using. And once you know that, then you can make sure that you have that installed on whatever device that you are using. So if you're using a laptop, make sure that you have a charger for that laptop that's going to be plugged in while you're in your interview, making sure it doesn't ever run out of battery while you're on your interview. You want to make sure that that laptop is going to be available at the time that you need it. And then you want to, of course, make sure that the space that you're going to be using is going to be clean and prepared before your interview. You don't want to sit in a space that has a ton of stuff behind you, very cluttered, a ton of stuff in the background that's just going to be a distraction to your interviewers. So make sure you have a clean space, a space that has enough room for you to be comfortable. Plan out where you're going to be sitting, what are you going to be sitting on, and what is your background going to look like. Another suggestion for the virtual interviews, you really want to make sure that you have good lighting. So with the lighting, if you don't have some kind of ring light to have in front of you, natural light works really, really well. And just make sure that you have a window that is in front of you. You don't want to have a window behind you because the interviewers may not be able to see you very well. But if you have a window in front of you, then that will shine that natural light on your face, and it's going to give you that nice look of lighting that you need. However, you do want to make sure that the lighting during the time of your interview is going to be good lighting. So if your interview is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I highly suggest going into that space that you're planning on doing your interview in and checking to see what the lighting is like at that time the previous day. So like I said, if your interview is at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, then on Monday at 3 p.m., you should be sitting in that spot and doing a practice virtual call, even just with yourself or with a friend, to see how that natural light is looking at that time of day. It may be too bright, it may be shining right on your face, and the sun could be, starting to set, it might be low, and it might be shining too brightly on your face, and then you're not going to have good lighting for your interview. So in that case, you may have to face a different direction, or you may have to get some blinds closed up there to help you with your lighting. But having that knowledge of what that lighting is going to be like at that time is really going to save you a lot of stress. Because if you sit down for your interview that day and the light is shining super bright into your eyes, you do not want to be asking the interviews for a minute so that you can get up and close the blinds or figure out a different position. That is the last thing you're going to be wanting to do during an interview because it makes you look unprepared. And I'm sure that they're going to be looking for someone who can prepare for an interview properly and be organized and ready. All right, the other super important thing is to have a good microphone. And so you definitely want to make sure that your interviewers can hear you loud and clear and that there's no background noise. So if you have a pet or if you have children that might be in the house that day, you want to arrange for those pets or children to be taken care of while you're in your interview. For example, if you have a cat that's going to be sitting outside the door and meowing the whole time, or scratching at the door, or if you have a dog that's going to be barking, that might be a really big distraction to your interviewer. And so you may want to have your pets in a different room or have somebody watching your pets just for that quick interview time. The last thing I want to talk about is your outfit. And so we already talked about making sure that you dress professionally for your interview. However, you do want to make sure that you know what you're going to be wearing that day beforehand. It will save you so much stress and so much time and mitigate that risk of being late for your interview. If you already know what you're going to wear, have it laid out. Make sure that it's washed and ready to go. It's ironed if it needs to be. You know what jewelry you're going to be wearing. You know what shoes you're going to be wearing. And please do not do the party on the bottom, business on the top whole thing with the virtual interviews. You definitely want to make sure that you're not wearing, sweatpants or pajama pants on the bottom thinking that they can't see you, because who knows? And why would you want to risk that? So just be fully dressed appropriately, fully dressed professionally to just take away any of that stress or risk of having them see that you're wearing pajama pants for an interview. And so just make sure that your outfit is completely ready the day before so that you can just throw it on and head to your interview. So those are the final tips for making sure that you are prepared. Now, the last thing I want to mention is that you need to go into this interview and just be you. They want to see who you truly are. Go in there, be confident, pull those shoulders back, give them your best smile, and answer honestly, truthfully, and be yourself. They want to see you. So I really hope that these 10 tips that came straight from school administrators are super helpful to you. You can always go back and listen again and take notes before your next interview. Good luck, and I hope they were helpful. Thanks for tuning in to Mindfuel. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mindfuel. I hope this episode allowed you to spend some time focusing on you. If you know someone who needs to hear this or would love this podcast, please share it with them or post it onto your story. I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes by Katie Reed. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you.